this, guys. So the body keeps the score. Now, first off, I just love that name because one of the things that we talk about in the coaching industry is the issues are in the tissues. I'll say that again. The issues are in the tissues because our body essentially it holds on to our energy. Like one of the things that I've realized over years of being a fitness coach and getting more into the healing practice is understanding how our body literally does keep the score. Like for myself, when I actually got me into quantum healing, I was going to doctors, therapists, chiropractors, spending thousands of dollars, and nothing was healing me until I went to this one shaman. I said, "Oh, you're holding on to this emotional pain and it's showing up in your lumbar spine." I was like, "What? Emotions show up in the body?" And that was the beginning of a massive change in terms of my understanding of the principles of healing. And to heal just means to make whole. And so the basis of this book is on the brain, mind, and body in the healing of trauma. And to me, this is honestly one of the most important topics we can talk about today because some of you may have had trauma. In fact, I bet all of you have some form of trauma you've experienced in your life. So look at this presentation in terms of how you can apply it to your own life. But the big thing for me is I've done a lot of work on myself and I'm still working on myself. And as I mentioned, it's great to have my father on this call. Don't just look at it for how you can apply it to yourself, but look at how you can utilize the skills that I'm teaching you today in ways that you can help navigate your relationships with other people. Because that's the thing that I love about teaching shadow work is it's an opportunity to create more dialogues, to have a deeper understanding of the vocabulary of how to express yourself. And that's the key point here is understanding how trauma shows up for people, how it affects their lives consciously and unconsciously, and how to heal from that trauma so you can show up as your best self. So let's keep rocking. So I've already showed you guys the book. Basically, by the end of this presentation, my goal is to sell you this book. No, I'm joking, but I'm sure some of you guys will pick this up because it's got so much good stuff within it. And I got this super long quote to start, but it was such a good quote. And as I mentioned before we started the recording, most of this presentation, say 70 to 80%, is literally just straight out of the book and a little bit of my interpretation with it. So this quote here, chapter 13, healing your own trauma and owning yourself. Nobody can treat a war, rape, molestation, or any other horrendous event for that matter. What has happened cannot be undone, but what can be dealt with are the imprints. That's a key point. The imprints of the trauma on the body, mind, and soul. The crushing sensations in your chest that you may label as anxiety or depression. The fear of losing control. Always being on alert for danger or rejection. The self-loathing. The nightmares and flashbacks. The fog that keeps you from staying on task and engaging fully in what you are doing. Being unable to fully open your heart to another human being. So these are all this quote, just so much gold within this because that's what a lot of people are struggling with. And they don't have the proper tools to actually go through this healing process. And that's a big part of this group is creating more opportunities for people to understand trauma and how it's affecting their lives. Now let's get into this. So owning your life. Do you own your life or does it own you? And Curtis and I actually made a video recently. We talked about, do you use your emotions or do your emotions use you? And that's a powerful point here because if you're not understanding how your emotions work, they could be running your life from the unconscious mind. Now, the challenge to recovery is reestablishing ownership of your body and your mind and ownership of yourself. Because if you have repressed, suppressed, or denied emotions, that's the things that are actually running your life from the unconscious mind. I go very deep into this in my own book. That's why I love some of the nuggets I pulled from this book are actually intertwined within my own book as well. Traumatized people chronically feel unsafe in their own body because the past is alive in the form of a gnawing interior discomfort. And this has a lot to do with the nervous system. And when I say the nervous system, I often tell people the future of health, healing, medicine, and just getting our bodies into a proper state really comes down to our emotions and our nervous system. So the goal here with some of the stuff I'm teaching you guys today is how to navigate how your nervous system is keeping you stuck, how to calm that nervous system down, and how to move forwards with living the life that you deserve. Not the life that you want, the life that you deserve. It's much more of a feminine, accepting, and receiving state when you're in a state of what you deserve in your life. Now, what happens is the trauma has effectively shut down people's interior compass and robbed them of the imagination they need to create something better. Now, one of the tools that I learned some of my quantum healing peeps is actually utilizing the imagination as a healing tool. Our imagination is extremely powerful. And part of the word imagination is is a magnification. And so when we learn to utilize our imagination as a healing tool, this is extremely powerful on our healing path. Because a lot of people, their unconscious mind is running their lives. It's actually controlling their imagination. So they keep reimagining the pain and the trauma and the loss. And that's how the body is actually still suffering, because it's stuck within our physiology. Now, victims of trauma cannot recover until they become familiar with and befriend the sensations in their bodies. Being frightened or in fight or flight mode means you are living in a body that is always on guard, burning lots of chi or life force energy. So this is why this is so important for me, for like all my years of coaching, is that realizing how much energy we are wasting repressing, suppressing, and denying emotions. It's actually learning how this process of how to integrate those emotions that sets us free from those shackles of our past. Now, physical self-awareness is the first step in releasing the tyranny of the past. This is why doing meditation, doing breath work, doing journaling exercises, taking the time to really slow down enough to actually listen to that inner voice. This is what we talk about with intuition. We'll talk a little bit more later about left and right brain and how those work within the body. But the key thing here is gaining self-awareness. This is why exercise and all these different tools that we utilize to what we call embody are so powerful for us. Now, when we talk about the body, I found this picture on the internet. I thought it was just absolute gold. Is how does the body keep the score? Now, you can look at some of these pictures. I don't have too many pictures in this presentation, so we'll sit here for a minute and just kind of look at this guy. So sometimes when overwhelming traumatic events happen, the physiological energy can be pushed down into the body. This trapped trauma energy can show up in different ways. So like some people, like they get a headache, but like they're taking pills, but like what they really need to do is actually face the emotional pain they're suffering from. Emotional flashbacks, fatigue, disassociation. That's a big one. People are disassociating. Physiological arousal, somatic flashbacks. It can literally affect your immune system. Like people are going out and taking all these prescription drugs, and we're going to talk about that a little bit in this presentation as well. What they really need to do is learn how to integrate that emotional pain. Craving food. We've all been stressed out and craved food. I've definitely done that in the past. Digestive issues, movement memory can literally affect your body's ability to move. And chronic pain. This chronic pain is not going to mitigate itself. You have to actually take the time to work with it rather than against it. As we talk about owning your life, or does your life own you? So how do we do this? How do we create this awareness? So it's all about looking within ourselves, the capacity to actually have the introspection, which is very crucial. And I'll jump ahead a little. Introception is Latin for looking inside. Okay, so being able to look within ourselves. Now, the limbic system, okay, for those of you that don't know, I'll go over this a little bit more. There's the neocortex, which is the top part of the brain. Actually, the next picture on the next slide goes over this more. The limbic system is where all emotions are. So I often teach people when I'm coaching them in shadow work is understanding when you're triggered, you're going to drop into your limbic system, and there's absolutely no logic going on. You're going to be highly emotionally triggered. So what happened is neuroscientists discovered that the only way we can consciously access the emotional brain is through self-awareness. By activating the medial prefrontal cortex. And that's how we begin to access the limbic system of the brain. This is the part of the brain that tells us what's going on inside us and thus allows us to feel our feelings. And that's a key point here. You can't heal it unless you feel it. You can't heal it unless you feel it. So you have to take the time to slow yourself down and actually honor your emotions rather than suppressing your emotions. And this is what I'm talking about, the essence of inner work. Okay. And like I said a moment ago, introception is Latin for looking within ourselves. That's why this is so important and so powerful. Now, most of our brains are constantly focused on the outside world. The only way to change how we feel is becoming aware of our inner experience. Now, some of you guys in this call, you've worked on with me in the past, or maybe you've worked on yourself in the past. The key thing here is like, how can I go a little bit deeper? How can I dig a little bit deeper? When we talk about specifically shadow work, 90% of your shadow is pure gold. It's just the 10% of darkness that you have to sift through. And as you create that introception or that awareness, that is where you're going to access your gold, because instead of wasting all this energy suppressing and repressing your emotions, you're actually integrating those emotions. This helps you become more whole, more complete, and you begin to actually literally manifest your dreams with far greater ease. You begin to become more magnetic is the key point here. Now, as I mentioned, we have the nervous system, but we also have what's called the triune brain. And so the triune brain is essentially the neocortex, which is our logical, rational brain, the limbic system, which is our emotional brain, and then the reptilian brain, which is more instinctual and like the dinosaur brain. Now, the key thing when we mention that is a lot of people are stuck in the reptilian part of their brain. They're constantly in fight or flight mode. Now, I know a lot of people on this call, you've done some work on yourselves, and that's great, but you're still going to face other people in your life that are stuck in their trauma. They're stuck in their limbic system or stuck in their reptilian brain. So I know some of you have even messaged me about like, oh, I'm stuck in this part of my brain. This is part of the introspection, is realizing like even me, who I teach this stuff, I can still get triggered and I'm dropping into my limbic system or I'm dropping into fight or flight mode. The key thing is having the awareness, because when you're pissed off, you say things that you don't actually mean. So learning how to calm yourself down is so crucial. This also translates, as I mentioned earlier, your ability to communicate with other people and recognizing, oh, this person is really triggered. So when someone else is triggered, they're going to try and trigger you. So being able to slow down the conversation, getting out of the reptilian brain, staying out of that limbic system, and activating that neocortex so you can improve all of your relationships. So we've all been in that situation where somebody's highly triggered and they're trying to trigger us. And you got to have those boundaries and keep yourself mentally and emotionally stable. I mean, one section of my book is into boundaries as well. It's so important. Now, we went over this right here, disassociation, right? So let's go a little bit deeper into what disassociation is. So what happens is when we disassociate, we are frozen in time and stuck in the past. Now, I'm not going over neuro-linguistic programming today, but some of you guys have watched my neuro-linguistic programming presentation in past calls. So we talk about neuro meaning neurons, just like we talked about the nervous system, linguistic meaning words, and program. So one of the things we talk about in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is that the map is not the territory. So what I mean by that is people who are stuck in the past, they will take, like, let's say you and I are having an argument, I trigger you, all of a sudden you're no longer conscious. You've pulled out your map from your traumatic childhood, and now you're using your map to navigate your reality. But that's not what's actually happening. And I'm not just saying that for you guys, but you could be in a conversation with somebody else and you trigger them, and all of a sudden their old map, which is not what's actually happening, is running their lives. And oftentimes this especially happens when people disassociate from their emotions. So you get an aspect of their psyche, remember psyche means soul, which is actually running the show, and they're not actually conscious. That's why this is so powerful. So what happens is when we have this disassociation is being traumatized means continuing to organize your life as if the trauma were still going on. Unchanged and immutable as each new encounter or event is, contaminated by the unconscious lens of the past. So I have this analogy, which I've used many times in the past, and I don't have it with me right here, but imagine a boat, and a boat is trying to attempt to get to its destination. And it's like, oh, I'm going to go lose weight, get in shape, find true love, all this stuff. But you have an anchor in your past, and that anchor is keeping you stuck, and the boat is just going in circles. That's why I explain this boat analogy to break down what shadow work is. So you're trying to get to your destination. You're like, literally, this is the root cause of a lot of mental and emotional health problems. You're trying to get to your destination, but you're anchored to your past, and it drives you completely nuts because you can't figure out why. It takes you actually taking the time to do the inner work to actually acknowledge those anchors that are keeping you stuck, bring them back online, which is the essence of integration of those emotions. And this is what sets you free, because this is a powerful point. After trauma, the world is experienced with a different nervous system. Like literally, if people are stuck in fight or flight mode, they'll be like, somebody has a lot of trauma for like fear. They're going to be walking around like, oh, what can I find to be afraid of? Like, or they're holding on to anger. Like, what can I find to be angry about today? They're looking for ways to project and project and project. This has helped me in some of my relationships with like family or friends where I know they have some kind of traumatic experience and realize like, oh, their internal operating system, or just like a computer, is looking for a way to express itself externally because people don't have the tools to look at it and integrate it internally. This is what happens when people disassociate. They essentially they're not fully present in the moment, which keeps them imprisoned in the past. This comes back to that boat analogy where you're anchored to your past and you're wondering, why am I not attracting true love? Why can't I make more money? Why can't I get healthy and fit? Because you're imprisoned in the past within your own mind. And like this, like I said, a lot of stuff comes straight out of the book, but I was like, oh my God, that's literally what's happening to so many people. They're imprisoned inside their own minds. And it's because they're identifying all change. This isn't even my opinion. It's from like getting coached by master coaches. All change comes at the identity level. Who do you identify as? If you're identifying as a victim, cool. You're going to keep seeing that show up and being reinforced in your life. If you identify as a legend, which I see all of you as legends, you're going to continue to see new changes within your life, which are in relation to what those images are in the subconscious mind. Now, this disassociation from the present moment creates depersonalization, a blank stare, absent-mindedness of being disconnected from the here and now moment. Now, some of you guys, you've probably been around people who are highly traumatized, and like there was like a disconnection. They weren't there. And so this is where you're able to help people to be present. We talk about in meditation, it's all about be here now. Ram Dass wrote the book, Be Here Now. So how can you learn to calm the nervous system down enough where you can actually tune into your body and listen to the message your body has for you? Because that's going to allow you to move forwards and move through the stuckness that you're experiencing. Another way of looking at this is a lack of being present makes people feel literally dead inside. And this dead inside essentially is the inability to navigate the present moment because your nervous system is remaining stuck in the horrors and misery of your past, which is extremely powerful. Like for me, when I started studying this stuff, I was like, oh, this is what people that like I love are struggling with. It's like some of my friends, like they had childhood traumas. This is what they're struggling with. Clients that I'm working with, oh, there's this story that's happening. And it may not be like you're completely dead inside, but a part of you is dead inside. And so that's why understanding how your emotions work is so powerful. And that's why I love teaching this and I love creating these conversations around this stuff because it's so powerful on people's healing journey. Quick check-in. How's everybody doing? You guys digging this stuff? Learning some good stuff? Yeah. Just raise your hand. Beautiful. That's why we're doing this stuff. Like the more we talk about this stuff, the more we actually heal the collective unconsciousness of humanity. Now I got another great quote for you guys. So sometimes we use our minds not to discover facts, but to hide them. One of the things that screen hides most effectively is the body, our own body, by which I mean the ends of it, its interiors. Like a veil thrown over the skin to secure modesty, the screen partially removes from the mind the inner states of the body, those that can constitute the flow of life or chi as it wanders in the journey of each day. This comes back to the point that I said earlier, but I cannot stress this enough. How much energy you could be wasting, or somebody that you love, suppressing, repressing, and denying. I will not feel that anger. Like you were a little boy and you're like, you were angry. And your parents said, you can't be angry. I was like, but I got to express my anger. Like, no, you can't be angry. And so you go, if I want to be loved, I can't express my anger. So you stuff it down into yourself. Jill Suzanne, you have a question? Say what's up.
No, sorry, I was just lowering my hand. Thanks.
Okay, cool. I was like, you got something to say? All right, no worries. All right, let's keep rocking. So, but just to touch on that again, does that make sense, guys? Like the more you suppress this energy, like you're like, why can't I get in shape? You're wasting all your energy suppressing your emotional pain. So that's why you're struggling to lose weight, attract true love, and all these things. Does that make sense? I want to make sure this is clear for you guys. You can just throw your hand up. Yeah. It's beautiful stuff. That's these deep conversations help people to change. So the bicameral mind. Okay, so when I say, what does that mean, bicameral mind? There's actually a book, I believe it's called The Bicameral Mind. So camera, like when you take a picture, camera means chamber. So we're talking about the two-chambered mind, okay? So the left and right hemispheres. And so essentially it's the yin and yang. I have a whole presentation that goes into the yin and yang nature, which is another very powerful presentation going deeper into Taoism. But the whole key here is understanding like how the brain works after trauma. This is very profound for me when I learned this from reading this book. Brain scans show past trauma activates the right hemisphere of the brain, which is creative, and deactivates the left hemisphere of the brain, which actually keeps us in this linear model. Now, the right side is intuitive, emotional, visual, spatial, and tactical, and the left side is linguistic, sequential, and analytical. The left side talks while the right side listens. Now, when we experience trauma, it can shut down one side of the brain. Has anybody here ever seen the video on YouTube by Jill Bolte? It's an amazing video. It's like a neuroscientist who has a stroke, and she's like talking to her. It's like, wow, I'm having a stroke. I can feel the right side of my brain. It's just left side of my brain is shut down. It's a really cool TED talk, actually, where she talks about her experience having a stroke and being a neuroscientist. So if you haven't seen that video, it's phenomenal. It goes in really deep into how this works. Now, when something reminds traumatized people of the past, the right brain reacts as if the traumatic event were happening in the present moment. I'm going to say that again. When something reminds traumatized people of the past, the right brain reacts as if the traumatic event were happening in the present moment. That's very important. Now, here's the issue, because of the trauma, because the left brain is not working very well, they may not even be aware that they are experiencing and reenacting the past. They are furious, terrified, enraged, ashamed, and frozen. And often this is happening unconsciously. I'm just going to like sit on that just for a moment so you guys can like think about that. You know, this could be you. This could be somebody that you love, and they're not even conscious that they're doing it. Like learning about shadow work, learning about the psyche has helped me to become so much more compassionate about the world. Like years ago, I was like, man, why are people so stupid? What's wrong with them? Then I realized like a lot of people are just unconscious and don't understand how their own mind works. That was my inspiration for building this Alchemy Healing Academy, because we actually taught people like the roadmap to how their mind works. They'd stop wasting so much energy. They'd have more fulfilling relationships in all areas of their life. That's why this is so powerful. Now, with that said, we have possessed two distinct types of self-awareness. One that keeps track of the self across time and space, and one that registers the self in the present moment. Now, if any of you guys have read my book, I talk about the linear model of consciousness and the quantum model of consciousness. And some of my fellow quantum healers in here, you understand the concept of the quantum model, because when you're operating from that quantum model of consciousness versus the linear model of consciousness, this is why I love Taoist philosophy. The quantum model is not linear, it's more wave-like. It's essentially like the middle way path right here in the yin and yang, because you are conscious of the darkness, you are conscious of the light, and you are transcending duality because of that awareness. Okay, so you're able to understand how the left and right hemispheres of the brain are working and how they are creating your reality. That's why this is so powerful. This is the depths of the introspection that allows you to show up more authentically in all your relationships in life. But the first step is your relationship with yourself. Now, here's another pretty cool little slide. I'm gonna take a sip of my drink here while you guys check this out. Now, what happens is, this is probably me when I was younger and far less emotionally intelligent. We experience a painful negative event. And what I used to do is I would close up, I'd suppress, avoid my feelings. This leads to unprocessed energy or chi within the body, and it becomes a psychological soft spot, and then you get future triggers. Now, what we do, specifically when we do shadow work, we understand how our psyche works. We stay open and process all emotions and feelings. This leads to processed energy, okay? It becomes a learning experience, and there are no future triggers. So you see this massive shift between these two realities here, where we actually learn how to process, when we talk about shadow work, to integrate our emotions rather than suppressing them. Because instead of wasting all the energy suppressing our emotions, we get all that energy back. And now we're able to show up, as I mentioned a moment ago, more authentically in all of our relationships. Because it's a massive energetic suck. We often talk about in the coaching industry, where are your energetic leaks? And this could be a massive energetic leak for you if you're operating from the space where you're suppressing and avoiding feeling your emotional pain. Now let's keep rocking here. So stuck in trauma, and this has a lot to do with our hormones. Okay, you're triggered, and you're experiencing the same old emotions, and those same old hormones are keeping you stuck in fight, flight, or freeze mode. Now, the stress hormones of a traumatized person take much longer to return to baseline and spike more quickly, disproportionately in response to mild stressful stimuli. So maybe you have an aunt, an uncle, and maybe even a parent who like they're triggered and boom, they're just going off in a different direction. So you gotta like walk on eggshells. But when you understand how this works, you can actually begin to support the people that you love. It always starts with working on yourself, but recognizing what your triggers are. We're gonna go over that a little bit more in the next slide. Now, these insidious effects of constantly elevated hormones include memory and attention problems, irritability, and sleeping disorders. This increased allostatic load, when you have an increased allostatic load, your body cannot maintain homeostasis. Over time, it leads to chronic disease within the body. Now, these elevated cortisol and increased allostatic load, okay, is what causes chronic physiological disease, and it's the root cause of mental health issues stemming from the stress response. That's why this is so powerful to understand, not just for yourself, but how is this affecting the people that I love? Some of you guys, like Michael's got kids, like how could the good stuff that's happening with my kids be affecting them? What's causing them to fall into these spaces? So no matter how much insight or understanding we develop, the rational brain is basically impotent to talk the emotional brain out of its reality. This is why understanding this logically is great, but the next level is actually going into understanding how those emotions are showing up in your body and creating a new conversation with those parts within yourself. As I mentioned, breath work, meditation, journaling, working with the support of a healer or a coach can be very powerful on that journey as well. Now, this picture goes right along with what I was just mentioning. This picture is actually from my book and my video course, where we get triggered. Now, this can go two directions. You're either spiraling out of control in your life or you're spiraling upwards, okay? And so you get triggered. There's a stimulus. So somebody yells at you at work. I like when people yell at me, so I'll say yelling. Then you create a meaning. That's the logical left brain. That meaning creates an emotion. That emotion creates a hormonal response within the body, and then you go back to the same old behavior. So let's say, like, well, I'll give you an example. Is most people, they get triggered, they go right to the emotion and the same old behavior. Triggered, emotion, behavior. They don't even imagine what the logic is. What's the meaning of this? So I often tell people the first step to your healing journey is getting clear on what triggers you. When you find that trigger, imagine it being like a thread, and you're pulling that thread to get to the root cause or core conflict. That helps you to understand the meaning. But the real change always happens at the emotional level. Okay. So we have to be able to slow our, this is why like the meditation process is so powerful, slowing yourself down so you can create that introspection into what's going on. So you get triggered, instead of you becoming emotional, like you get triggered and you go eat a whole tub of ice cream, which may sound good, but you're going to get pretty fat and not going to feel very good. But you get triggered, you slow down, like, oh, this is because when I was a child, I wasn't loved or I wasn't given what I deserved. And this is creating this emotion for me. And then you can again start changing your behaviors. Like I've been a coach for 20 years. People's like, I want to lose weight. I want to get in shape, or I want to change this about my life. Well, they're focusing on the behavior. I want to get them to the place where they understand what's triggering you, what's the cause, and what are the effects that are being created, and how can you change the meaning that's so powerful to create new emotions. And those emotions come back to what we just went over in this last slide. Those emotions are creating hormonal responses. This is why people get addicted to being a victim. They're like, oh my God, yes, I get to be a victim again today. Or like, oh my God, I have to find this thing that's going to make me feel the anger, or make me feel the sadness, or make me feel the fear that I don't know how to face within me. And this is what's keeping people so stuck, because they have this hormonal addiction internally, and no one's teaching anybody how to do this work. That's why I'm so adamant about teaching it. So we have a system to learn how to navigate the emotional storms that we're often creating for ourselves, but also how to navigate the emotional storms that people project at us. Now, let's get into the drugs. Who likes drugs? I'm just joking. So the triumph of pharmacology, the drug revolution. This right here is straight out of the book. This is not my opinion at all. So Bessel van der Kolk, this guy has over 40 years of experience in therapy. And he said this: I've come to realize that psychiatric medications may deflect attention from dealing with underlying issues. This guy's a legend in therapy, and I love that quote. I have come to realize that psychiatric medications may deflect attention from dealing with the underlying issues. That's one of the most important quotes of this whole presentation. Now, it all started with a theory that mental illness is caused primarily by chemical imbalances in the brain that can be fixed with pharmaceutical drugs. This has actually been recently disproven. If you don't believe me, go Google it. There's a whole bunch of new research out in the last year that's disproven this, because a lot of this comes down to pharmaceutical drugs and their marketing. They're out for profit. So one of my goals, and for years being a coach, is teaching people how to heal themselves so they can get off prescription drugs. They're not a slave to this $3.6 billion industry. $3.6 billion spent on antipsychotic drugs. And that the number of people under the age of 20 on antipsychotic drugs tripled between 1999 and 2008. Some serious stats right here. Now, too often, drugs are prescribed instead of teaching people the skills to deal with distressing physical reactions. Medications only blunt the sensations and do nothing to resolve them or transform them from toxic agents into allies. And like that right there is why I built this group, because we need to have more community, more people we can feel safe talking about our mental and emotional challenges. Because if we do that, okay, this is like prehabilitation. You don't have to go see a doctor. You don't have to go see a therapist. You don't need to go take prescription drugs, because you have the support and you have the tools to learn to become your own healer. And that to transform is the essence of alchemy or transmutation, turning base metals into gold, turning base mental aspects into gold, metal and mental being very similar in terms of the alchemical process. By the way, a quick plug: next month's presentation is the fundamentals of alchemy. So you want to get into more of the depths of what alchemy is, I'll be doing that next month. Can't wait for that one. Now, a little bit more on drugs. So drugs, numbing the pain. Okay, I'll go over here real quick. We cannot selectively numb emotions. When we numb the painful emotions, we also numb the positive emotions. And I've like met people who've experienced this. Like, I have a hard time, that's not that happy because they're taking all these anti-anxiety, antidepressant. And I don't want to hate on people who may be taking any prescription drugs. I think they're a beautiful thing in the short term if you're really struggling. If you're taking them long term, the side effects are probably going to be affecting you in some strange ways. Now, key pointer, as I mentioned, this is not my opinion. This is straight from the book. Drugs cannot cure trauma. they can only dampen the expressions of a disturbed physiology. I'm going to say that again because I believe deeply in this. Drugs cannot cure trauma. They can only dampen the expressions of a disturbed physiology. This is why learning to listen to our bodies. Like, as I mentioned earlier, my dad's a sound mixer, and he taught me, it's like the center of the word heart is ear. We have to learn to listen with our hearts. He always told me, you take two ears and put them together, the shape of a heart. So when we learn to listen to our hearts and listen with our hearts, that'll be one of the greatest tools you can have in your healing journey. Thank you for that, Pops. I love sharing that with people. Now, they can help control feelings and behavior, but always at a price, because they work by blocking the chemical systems that regulate engagement, motivation, pain, and pleasure. So it's like there's always a cause and effect. It's always a cause and effect. Okay. So when I take this drug, like I used to say, like, like smoking weed or drinking alcohol, whatever drug, it's like, it's giving you a high, but what is it taking from you? Not that I, like you want to drink, smoke a little bit, it's all good, but like it's giving you something. There's always a give and take here. So that's just a thing you can marinate on for yourself. Quick check-in, guys. How we doing? Feeling good? Learning some good stuff? Love it. Love it. So let's keep going here. We got about, say, 5-6 slides to go. So this is your brain on trauma. This is a section of the book. This is your brain on trauma. How are we doing on time? Pretty good. This is a very important point right here. Linguistic programming, okay? Breaking the silence. Some of you may be going through this right now. I went through this, not talking about my emotional pain. And I had a physiological pain show up because I wouldn't allow myself to express it or talk about it. Now, breaking the silence. Silence equals death. Silence about trauma also leads to death, the death of the soul. This is straight out of the book. I was like, wow, this is so deep and real. As long as you keep secrets and suppress information, you are fundamentally at war with yourself. Your nervous system is at war with itself through suppression. This is where I talked about the future of health, healing, medicine is all about your emotions and your nervous system, because the more you suppress those emotions, the more it's going to affect your nervous system. You're going to have blocks. You're going to have physiological pain. You're like, why is this happening to me? And the physiological pain, because you can't figure it out, is going to drive you nuts. It's going to give you mental and emotional health problems too. Now, if you hide from yourself the fact that you experienced abuse or trauma when you were young, you are vulnerable to react to triggers like an animal in a thunderstorm. I thought that was a cool analogy, like an animal in a thunderstorm. Like you're like, oh, what's going on? And like you're constantly jacked up. Like I mentioned earlier, the allostatic load, you're not going to live as long and you're not going to be as happy and you're going to be constantly stressed out. As I mentioned, some of you may be strong with this stuff, or it could be people that you love. So being able to understand how all of this works is extremely powerful. Now, communicating fully is the opposite of being traumatized, like being able to like fully express yourself. It's like when you speak, it's energy leaving your body. This is why when I coach people, I'm like working with them to be able to get that stuff out verbally or through breath work. How can we move that chi, that blocked energy within the body? Being able to share your deepest pain and darkest feelings with another human being is one of the most profound experiences we can have and is fundamental to healing. As I mentioned, that's what this group is all about. In a couple of months, I want to launch a weekly call so we can have more space and have more community and more support. Now, how do we describe this experience? And this is a very powerful word, alexithymia. That's something you may want to write down, alexithymia. Difficulty identifying, describing, and expressing emotions. And when I share that, like honestly, some of the best feedback that I've gotten as a coach is I had people tell me when they went through like my shadow work or like some of my coaching, is like, I never knew how to express my emotions. And you taught me the vocabulary to express myself, how to talk to my mom or my dad or my brother and be able to explain things. Because a lot of people, that's why we're doing this group, is we're creating space and more understanding in how to authentically express yourself. It can be one of the most healing experiences of your life. Like I said, having my dad on this call, or being able to like talk about like mental and emotional health problems from my mother's side. Like my mother was the 11th child of 14 kids. There was a lot of trauma on my mother's side of the family, but because we've talked about it, we're squashing it, we're killing it. That stuff dies with my generation. So I love sharing that because all of you can do that too. So let's go a little deeper into what alexithymia means. No words for feelings. Alexithymia is Greek for not having words for feelings and difficulty expressing emotion. I mean, how many people are afflicted by this in the world today because we're not taught emotional intelligence? I've actually been doing some work with teens lately, and I'm kind of plugging them a little bit with like how to express themselves emotionally. Now, many traumatized children and adults lack the ability to describe their feelings because they cannot identify what their physical sensations mean. That's straight out of the book. They cannot identify what their physical sensations mean. Remember earlier in this call, I said all change occurs at the identity level. So if you are identifying with something and you're noticing something physiologically, like some of my healing books, I always pull out all kinds of books, like The Secret Language of the Body, your body is like a roadmap to the mind. This is where I blend shadow work with quantum healing. We do psychological work and we do stuff on the energetic level with the body. We can see the connections between what's going on psychologically and physiologically. Now, what happens for people is they tend to register emotions as physical problems rather than signals that deserve their attention. Instead of feeling angry or sad, they experience muscle pain, bowel irregularities, or other symptoms, but no cause can be found. Now, an example of this, and I've talked about this before with emotional pain in Western medicine, they can't seem to figure out some things like we don't know what the root cause of rheumatoid arthritis is. We don't know what the root cause of fibromyalgia is. Like people who are holding on to emotional pain, what's the root cause of colon cancer, right? Or what's the leading killer in America? Heart disease. I was actually coaching a nurse we were talking about heart disease the other day, and she totally agreed with me. People not expressing their emotions could likely be the root cause of heart disease because they're holding on to so much energy and their heart becomes affected by that. And this is the key point here. No cause can be found, but often the cause is the roots of our emotions. So they learn to shut down their overwhelming emotions. And as a result, they no longer recognize what they are feeling. I'm going to say that again. It's very powerful. They learn to shut down their overwhelming emotions. And as a result, they no longer recognize what they are feeling. And this is what the root cause of a lot of physiological disease is. When we like, what's the root cause? I'm sorry, we can't figure out what's wrong with you. And it's like, well, have we imagined the emotions? Because a lot of Western medicine, emotions, that doesn't show up in the body. Can we take a pill? We have to start learning how to have these conversations because suppressing, repressing, and denying emotions is the root cause creating these effects in the body. That's why like I said, I'm so adamant about teaching this and creating these conversations because the body can heal itself. We just have to learn to listen to it because the body is actually keeping the score. That sounded good. So a few more slides to go, you guys. Making good time. I want to get done by 7, killing it. So relationships, navigating safety in terror. If people naturally turn to for care and protection terrify you or reject you, you learn to shut down and ignore your feelings. This often occurs with many children. I often use the explanation, like let's say like you're an adult and you're having trouble dating, you keep attracting people who shame you. Maybe when you were a little boy or a little girl, you're seeking love from your mom and dad. You're like, I want to be loved, and they shame you as a way of controlling you. Like, I want to be loved, and then you're shamed, and your brain goes, wait, like if I want to be loved, I have to be shamed. And it gets plugged into your unconscious. And then you're an adult and you're like trying to date and you're like keep attracting people that shame you. And you're like, why are people keep shaming me? It's because there's a part of your psyche meaning soul, that completely associates love with that feeling of shame. So until you face that shame, acknowledge the shame, integrate that shame, acknowledge that inner child, because we're talking about inner child work, you're going to keep it's like going to keep driving you nuts. And you're like, if I take a pill, it'll suppress it, but you didn't face the shame. That's why this is so important. Now, managing your terror all by yourself can give rise to another set of problems: disassociation, despair, addiction, and chronic sense of panic, and relationships that are marked by alienation, disconnection, and explosions. Some of you guys may have experienced this in your own relationships, right? I've experienced this in my past when I didn't have this introspection. Like, why do I keep attracting this type of person into my life? What am I doing wrong? It's not that I wasn't doing anything wrong, it's that I hadn't faced the energy within myself. As I said earlier, 90% of your shadow is pure gold. It's that 10% of darkness that you sift through that sets you free in magical ways. Now, relief does not come until they are able to acknowledge what has happened and recognize the invisible demons they are struggling with. Now, when I say invisible demons, if you're repressed, suppress, and deny emotions, those essentially become your demons. You're like, you get triggered, and all of a sudden the anger comes out in really ugly ways. You're like, well, where'd that come from? Like, I don't know, where did it come from? Like, you didn't face those internal demons of anger, and they're going to get triggered, and they're going to come out, and they're going to come out in ugly ways. That's why this is so powerful. And like I said, for you guys, many of you have done work, you're still going to trigger other people. And those invisible demons that are running people's lives, they may project them onto you. That's why you got to have good boundaries. Now, most traumatized people need an anchor and a great deal of coaching to do this work, or a therapist or some type of healer to help them to move that energy through their body and process it. So how we doing, guys? Feeling good? We'll check in here. We're almost done. Good wisdom, right? So I love this analogy here. The conscious person uses the world as a mirror to better understand and to master themselves. The unconscious person attacks the mirror because they don't realize it's a mirror. This is a hard part for your ego to realize, like, why does this keep happening to me? Maybe it's happening for you to look more deeply into yourself, to understand your true inner nature. In Tibetan Buddhism, your inner nature is known as Rigpa. So when you really dive deep into who you are, to begin to actually integrate these parts of yourself you may have been repressing. So like I said, last couple of slides here, some concluding details. We're pretty much right on time. I love it. So exploring the causes creating the effects. Trauma constantly confronts us with our fragility, but we are on the verge of being a trauma conscious society. That's the essence of the shadow work. That's the essence of this group or this community that we're developing here. Because being able to feel safe with other people defines mental health. I'm going to say that again. Being able to feel safe with other people defines mental health. Safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. Emotional intelligence starts with being able to label your own feelings and attuning to those emotions of the people around you. Your emotions are essentially your intuition. If you're out of touch with your emotions, you're out of touch with your intuition, and you're out of touch with living the life that you deserve. I said that before. It's all about living the life that you deserve. Trauma, this is straight out of the book, but I agree with this 1000%. Trauma is now our most urgent public health issue, and we have the knowledge necessary to respond effectively. The choice is ours to act on what we know. So I hope that you guys who were here today and listening to this presentation will take this wisdom, apply it to your own lives. If you have any questions, please let me know. We'll chat a little bit after I end the recording. I got one other little slide here. Never underestimate the power of a person who is healing their trauma. This person has been through the darkest places that the world has to offer and is still standing before you, committed to seeing the light. So just to finish off here, you guys, I want to thank you all for joining this call. It's absolutely a pleasure. I love teaching this stuff. It inspires me, and I often get people who watch these calls, and it can create minor changes that turn into massive changes in their life. If you'd like to get involved with the Academy, apply to join the Inner Circle group coaching program or one-on-one coaching. My goal is to launch the Inner Circle probably the next month or two. If you have any interest in that, it's going to be like a super affordable monthly fee just to keep you accountable. And I'll be teaching some of the stuff I've learned in my year-long Quantum Healer program. This past year, I've invested about $15,000 into coaching, and I've integrated a lot of it. I want to start teaching it. So if you guys have any interest, please let me know. We'll be doing weekly calls for that. Also, if you want to learn more, I have my book, my video course. You can go to my new website. You can purchase the video course or the book. The book's only $15. Highly recommended. It's been helping a lot of people. And I have the video course, which goes along with the book as well if you want to go a little bit deeper. These monthly calls, the workshop, it's third Thursday each month. I used to do third Wednesday, but third Thursday just sounds sexier. So we're doing third Thursday, baby. 6 p.m. will be here next month. Let me check and make sure what day that is next month. But I think I mentioned this earlier. Next month's topic is the fundamentals of alchemy, and it's the Alchemy Healing Academy. So I want to start diving into what alchemy means so that you guys can learn how to become your own alchemists. That's what this is all about. Learn how to become your own healer. The third Thursday next month is the 20th. If you're part of my newsletter, you'll get an email. You can click on the link to sign up for it, and then you'll get an email to remind you a day before and an hour before the call. I just set this all up with this new website. Thank you, Curtis, for your help, by the way. And a special, this is the other thing that I do. If you're part of my Inner Circle, if you're part of these calls, I offer specials for my coaching. You can do 2 quantum healing sessions with me for $150, 45 minutes each. If you have any interest, please let me know. And just message me if you have any other questions or you want some more details. The whole vision for this group is to build more of a tribe. Like I said, these calls once a month are free, but in the next month or two, as we build the back end of this website, I want to be able to give people access to the school, also joining the Inner Circle. And I'm just checking this chat here. Thank you so much. Last little picture here. Just remember, accept that healing takes time. I always say the path is the medicine. So stay poised, stay patient. I love you all. I appreciate you all. Keep doing the work, and don't hesitate to reach out if you need support.